do it. Hello, everybody. My name is Bridget Ling, and I am the Vice President of Marketing here at Pitcher. Really, really excited to have you all here with us today. Thank you for joining us. It is wonderful to be joined by people from literally around the world to talk about what we here at Pitcher call Sales Enablement 2.0, or the next evolution of sales enablement solutions. If you have questions today, drop them into the questions tab at the dashboard at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to those at the end. There's also the chat feature. So throw your chat comments in, say hi to your crew here. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the discussion today as well. So I am joined today by Pitcher's CEO, Kevin Chu. Kevin has a long career in B2B SaaS. He spent 10 years in content management, and he has spent the past 6 years in sales enablement. Truly, sales enablement industry is his language. And now he is the CEO here at Pitcher. Kevin, it's great to be joined by you here today.
Thank you, Bridget. This is awesome. I love the live nature of this thing. I actually see people joining. I see people, a lot of familiar names out there, a lot of folks I've known for years. And so thank you for doing this, and thank you for joining.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. All right, Kevin. So over the decades, you've seen a lot of change in coaching, content, and in the sales enablement industry as a whole. So get us started today. Give us a little background on what you've seen, and then we'll pivot and talk about where we're going.
Cool. So I guess a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, not just kidding, but like 20 years ago, the whole industry was around content management. And content management was companies like Documentum and FileNet and Interwoven. And that was all about unstructured data. Unstructured data is web files, HTML files, Word documents, PowerPoints, SMS messages, voice messages, emails. That is all data that sits outside of traditional row and column database. Unstructured data management was set into motion to solve a bunch of different problems, but the one that really rose to the top was sales and marketing efficiency, in that there was a lot of convergence there because a lot of sales and marketing is done in unstructured data sources. That's why you saw the rise of great companies like Adobe that were doing things in Creative Suite, because you saw a lot of people generating rich content, a lot of unstructured data, a lot of web data was being pushed out. So that was really the genesis, or the 10, 15 years ago, was content management. As we moved into the sales enablement era, that was obviously one of the first logical landing zones for unstructured data. And that was because salespeople live in unstructured content. They live in PowerPoint, they live in emails, they live in Word documents. And so that's why you saw the rise, or the content management piece gravitate towards the go-to-market engine. When we defined the sales and marketing, sales enablement vector, that was definitely focused on technology companies. We were a technology company, we were selling to technology companies. So even today, if you look at sales enablement as we define it as 1.0, which is centered around content and coaching, we'll get to that more in a second. It's primarily technology companies, a little bit of financial services, because you've got pitch books and fact sheets generated, live, interactive documents that are being generated. But primarily, if you open up the hood of most organizations, the early adopters of sales enablement 1.0 were technology companies, because say like you're doing a pitch for a new database or a new way to do security, it's a PowerPoint. And so you're managing the brand and you're managing reusable content objects. So that really grew the importance of the sales content repository. The second piece that was important was that now that I know what to show, in other words, I've got personalized content, I've got content the machine has recommended that I show in this particular selling situation. Now I've got the coaching aspect of it. What do I need to say? What do I need to know? And that was CROs looked across their organization and said, I need to have people that have good sales skills, good product knowledge, good effective coaching for a delivery. And so, Mr. Learning and delivery person, you sit in HR, can you give me a system to train up my reps? And the learning and development people, they had things like Saba and Cornerstone On Demand, which were more for general training. They weren't really targeted towards sales coaching. And that's why you saw the rise of companies like Lego and MindTickle and BrainShark. All of those companies were squarely focused on readiness and coaching.
Mhm.
Readiness being, how can I give you the right pitch effectiveness, and coaching being, once I record that, have the machine review me. Maybe I'm going too fast, too slow, not using the right keywords. Maybe I'm stammering a little bit, and then workflow or snippet out the best pieces and workflow those around to my friends, my colleagues, my manager, to get them to review it, to get them to see what the definition of good is. And the last pillar of Sales Enablement 1.0 was content analytics. So once I push out a piece of content from my sales content repository, I need to know how that's being consumed, what is of interest, and that eventually decoded to buyer intent. In other words, how are buyers engaging with my content? What are they looking for? So that was really the genesis of Sales Enablement 1.0. It was focused squarely on technology companies because those were the first companies adopting it. And as we're going to see in a second, the next shoe to drop in Sales Enablement 2.0 is definitely focused on other use cases, other product features, other industries that really define Sales Enablement 2.0.
Yeah. So interesting. Thanks for leveling the playing field on 1.0. But as we pivot and move and evolve into 2.0, as we've noted here at Pitcher, its foundational basis is that it's always on. It's mission critical to the organization. Tell us a little bit about that, and then give us a synopsis on kind of these 5 main points.
So if you go back to Sales Enablement 1.0, Sales Enablement 1.0 was content and coaching. And if the server for content management goes down, or if the server for learning goes down, it's not the end of the world. It's not a disaster. I can pick off that deck that I had saved off last week or last month on my hard drive, and I can use that deck. I can modify it, and it's not the end of the world. And if I don't get the just-in-time training for the latest product release, not a big deal. I can get by. And so it wasn't Sales Enablement 1.0 did not have the mission criticality that 2.0 has. And what I mean by that is always on mission critical, is that when sales enablement, and you'll see in a second, when certain use cases, either with pharmaceuticals, life sciences, medical device, CPG, publishing, wealth management, you're going to see that this is mission critical. This is right in the revenue stream. If the server for a Sales Enablement 2.0 product goes down, that's that's a that's a hard stop. That's like the cash registers stopping at Costco, or the shopping cart functionality failing at Amazon. That is a non-starter. And so the mission criticality has gone up tremendously. So, as practitioners in sales enablement, as buyers of sales enablement technology, this is what you should demand from your sales enablement provider, is that mission criticality, that always on, and all these 4 aspects below, or 5 aspects on this slide, is that content and coaching done better. We'll see that in a second, is that as we're AI enabling content and coaching, it takes it to a different level. Fully embedded AI, as we're going to see, the ability to not only do content and coaching with AI, but also to do Gen AI, the ability to generate content objects, the ability to do agendas in advance, a comprehensive selling experience. This is the end-to-end experience from start to finish of I'm presenting to a customer, I'm taking an order, I'm doing inventory control, I'm calling a CPQ module, I'm doing a product data management module. All of those pieces come together. Being able to unify complex data sets.
Yeah.
In traditional Sales Enablement 1.0, it was just about unstructured data. Now we're talking about the marriage of unstructured and structured. Structured data coming from databases, XML, CSV files, data API, database APIs. So a lot of that information being married into unstructured conversations, as we'll see in a second, super important. And lastly, operational integration. The ability to connect into those CPQ systems, the ability to manage the CRM system, the ability to push back to or pull data from an inventory system, update inventory, update shopping cart real time. All of those 6 or 5 aspects come into play when defining that Sales Enablement 2.0. But and as buyers, as practitioners out there, we should all be demanding that from our provider.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kick us off here with a Mondelez example.
So Mondelez is a great example. For those of you who don't know Mondelez, if you go into your pantry, or go into my pantry for that matter, and open up that door, what am I staring at? I'm staring at Ritz crackers, Oreo cookies, Triscuit crackers, and Cliff bars. well, that's my pantry. But I'm sure it's very similar to yours. Well, how did those snacks get there? How did they get to the store? Where did I buy those? I probably bought those at a grocery store like a Publix or a King Super or a Walmart Supercenter. Well, when a Mondelez rep, and this is selling basics in the trenches selling, when a Mondelez rep knocks on the door of that Publix grocery store or that Walmart Supercenter manager, he's got about 30 seconds to convince that store manager to A, to deploy that end cap that's going to drive this sale. So he's got to reach back into operational systems and say, what is the demographic in your 50-mile radius for buying these types of cookies? Is there an event coming up like a Super Bowl or a NASCAR event that's coming up that's going to require branding, that's going to drive consumption of snacks? And if you look at the lower left of this slide, there's over a 500,000 visits right now have been driven by Pitcher into those Mondelez with those Mondelez reps selling into those selling environments. And as we'll see in a second, there's particular areas of augmented reality and virtual reality that come into play because that store manager has got just about 2 seconds to decide whether he's going to deploy that end cap display. But if you look at the adoption metrics for this, now again, this is always on mission critical stuff. So we've got adoption metrics here from a CPG organization of 94%, approaching 100% adoption. That means 100% of the sales teams every day are logging on to the application and using it. They're using it to drive revenue. They're using it to drive stickiness. They're using it to drive interactions. This is not a nice to have. This is not something that, hey, I'll log on once a month. They are using this in their day-to-day interactions. The same goes for publishing. Mission critical, every day, every rep is accessing the system on a day-to-day basis. They're using this. And this could apply to life sciences, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, medical device, you can name it, across the board. Adoption rates are through the roof when it comes to true mission critical sales enablement 2.0.
Yeah, we do have that question already, and I think it's important just as we start to look
Oh,
into the
cool.
5 aspects is, does 2.0 apply for regulated companies such as those in the healthcare industry?
Yeah, 100%. So the same governance and compliance. So initially, when technology companies adopted Sales Enablement 1.0, it was for branding compliance. In other words, the CMO wanted to make sure that the brand logo that was being used in the field was the same color, the same font, the same pixelization. Well, that's nothing compared to a healthcare regulated e-detailing um, uh, medical device sampling, consent management, all of which is important when it comes to both healthcare, life sciences, medical device, all of those highly regulated discussions that a rep is having with a healthcare provider, with a with ultimately with a pharmacy or a store and retail environment. All of those are highly regulated environments and that are over the top compliance and regulatory constraints. So yes, absolutely. Sales Enablement 2.0 operates in highly regulated environments.
Kevin, you mentioned the augmented reality use in CPG. I'm going to play that here, and you can just speak to that.
Yeah, so this is a cool video. This is actually what Mondelez reps use when they're going into a store, and you look at the way that this display is structured, the way that those wooden sides, how that fits perfectly into looks like a Whole Foods to me. But then they can rotate that display. They can stick it the end cap. They can stick it. Here's the branding, like I said, for the new NASCAR event or the Super Bowl. All of this is a Sales Enablement 2.0 interaction that captures the critical selling moment, allows the seller to position the product perfectly, allows them to pull in the structured and unstructured data. Unstructured data being this video, structured data being all the sales metrics and demographics and effectivity that this display is driving for that store manager. So you can see that this is a no-brainer to deploy this end cap.
That's great. All right. Well, let's dive in. So let's start with content and coaching done better.
Sure. As I said before, content and coaching is table stakes and demand from your provider that they have content and coaching. But content and coaching and 2.0 environment is elevated to that next level of artificial intelligence, leaning in to build up pitch decks. So like in this example, you see that a pitch deck is being pulled from a content repository. Slides are being either supplied by the artificial intelligence and agent. They're being within the guidelines of regulatory and compliance. They are put together. Say I've got to have this disclaimer. I've got to have this slide that follows up this other slide, but yet the seller has the ability to customize within the guidelines and guardrails of compliance and governance. So, the ability for them to build this pitch deck and deploy it, but then also to test the analytic effectivity. What is what slides are resonating? What content is actually landing with the customer? What are they interested in? So as you see, as they're building, this pitch deck, they're going on and building this piece right here. And this particular one is for retirement planning and wealth management. So highly critical discussion for both enrolling in 401k and savings plans and college plans, but also presenting that structured, and here again, that structured and unstructured data. Now I've got the ability to present this retirement plan to this customer and let them know that they're not interested necessarily in retirement pieces. They're interested in 529B plans for their kids' college. So the
Yeah.
ability for me to, as a seller, to understand what my customer is interested in, and then to lean into that particular product.
And in those highly regulated industries like
100%.
tech, financial services is really important to be able to have guardrails around that content. Yeah. Fully embedded AI.
So fully embedded AI is about taking the burden out of the daily housekeeping tasks of sellers. In other words, as a seller, I live to be in the moment. I live to be in front of my customer. I live to be interacting with the customer. I don't live to be putting together agendas or doing follow-up notes. If I've got 5 calls to make that day, I don't want to be bothered with doing 5 call-up notes or remembering what the third call was about at the end of the day back in my hotel room. And when I'm doing up an agenda, I want to make sure that I'm presenting. Well, marketing wants to make sure I'm presenting, the latest content. They want to make sure I'm presenting the latest messages, the latest offering that they're offering up. But also, the system should be smart enough to deliver and know what items I've talked about before, what they bought in the past, and what their propensity to buy in the future looks like. In other words, craft me an agenda that is specific for this customer, and make that agenda. AI can make that agenda. I'm not sure this is going forward, Bridget,
There you go.
but make sure that agenda is something that can either be lengthened, shortened, put into a different language, can be put into a casual format, can put into a formal agenda, because maybe I'm speaking to a C-level executive that likes a little bit more formal. So
Right.
the ability for me to use AI to craft that agenda in advance, freeing up my key selling time, freeing up my ability to get in front of that key customer time, and then at the end of my calls, the ability for artificial intelligence to generate that follow-up, that next best action. What is the next best content action? What is the next best action for me as a seller for that interaction? And this applies across, as you see here, in a hearing aid example. This is a medical device, highly regulated environment, something that is that needs to have guidelines and guardrails around.
The next point here is comprehensive selling experience. This one's really important.
Yeah, thank you for teeing that up. This is something that having that end-to-end experience that sellers are demanding. And here's a publishing example, but this could apply to any example in regulated environments, like I said, pharma, med device, life sciences, healthcare, wealth management, whereas I've got all these different rich media pieces coming in from a product data management catalog. I've got inventory. I'm being able to take an order here. I can exactly show the number of orders that you've had in the past, what the status of those orders is, what the inventory management is. One of the things that was an epiphany for us as we were developing, leaning into what Sales Enablement 2.0 was that in 1.0, you weren't necessarily selling inventoriable items. Now you're selling inventory items. This is manufacturing. This is medical device. This is pharmaceuticals. And you've got all the different parameters that go into and concerns that go into actually shipping a physical good.
All right. the ability to unify complex data sets.
So this is a wealth management example, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah,
super important in this context. Again, you've got unstructured data and structured data. You've got unstructured data coming from pictures and images and Word and PowerPoints and presentations, married with structured data coming off CSV files, XML databases, database APIs, and all that has to come together in a very interactive, immersive. As you see here in this picture example, you have the ability to dynamically build these stack diagrams. You can drill down, drill up into that, and show the customer real time during their wealth management session exactly what they're looking at from different asset classes, different offerings, different returns on investment, and obviously all of this is highly regulated information. You have to not only produce the information from source databases that are trackable, that are traceable, but also go back in time and say, oh, 3 years from now, remember those funds that you presented to that individual? Well, there was some net asset value differentials in those funds you presented. Can you produce the ability, how you exactly calculated those? And so
yeah,
the ability for it to go back in time is a
sure.
critical feature. So as you see, this here again, this is a wealth management exercise that this wealth manager is presenting to this high net worth individual all the different disclaimers, all the trends, all the glossary pieces, but as well as all the charts and graphs that's going to drive their portfolio.
And that dynamic nature of this content, rather than just that snapshot in time, but the ability for it to populate, in real time is really something that is really very 2.0 by definition.
100%. Demand that from your provider.
All right. And then the last point here is operational integration, which is it means a lot. There's a lot of ways in which 2.0 will integrate operationally with your organization. Give us a couple of examples.
So what's important here is that there's multiple constituencies that Sales Enablement 2.0 meets and really enables. Is that there is the seller. Obviously, you saw the selling metrics of the 95% of utilization across the board. That's phenomenal to get those sellers. The sellers want to use this application. It's something that drives their revenue. But here we see examples of dashboarding and metrics. And dashboarding and metrics is primarily focused on marketing ops, sales leadership, marketing leadership. So those constituents, what are they concerned about? They're concerned about making sure that the content assets, the enablement pieces, the selling motions are unified, consistent, and reflect revenue. In other words, if I turn this dial over here to say I want to increase the velocity of this particular content program, maybe I'm launching a campaign, I'm doing a different presentation here, I want to make sure that has a efficacy over in revenue. The direct correlation at the dashboard level that executives want to see between content being deployed, coaching being deployed, and revenue efficacy. That's another aspect of Sales Enablement 2.0 that buyers and practitioners must demand.
We do have a few questions that have been sent in directly, and another one in the chat here. So we'll get to those in a second. But before we do that, give us a wrap up on kind of the benefits of 2.0 and where the industry's heading moving forward, and what people should be asking, what organizations should be asking from their sales enablement solution.
So thank you for that. Great lead in that, as I talked about at the top of the hour, the 1.0 industry primarily focused on high tech, primarily focused on content and coaching. Very effective, very useful, but not mission critical. And this is something that we're seeing as the market is driving towards the mission criticality of sales enablement as it moves operational, because now you're taking inventory, you're checking inventory, you're taking orders, you're doing pricing, you're doing quoting, you're having a real interaction using a system with a wealth manager. You're going into an HCP's office and pitching them on the latest new drug efficacies that your company's launching. You're doing e-detailing, you're doing sampling. That is a real-time interactive discussion that is happening in the doctor's office in a wealth manager's office, that underscores the mission criticality of 2.0. And I think that's the separation point. So that's probably the key takeaway of the discussion. If your sales enablement provider is not up to the task of delivering those real-time, mission critical, always on aspects, then you should demand it.
All right, I'm going to pivot to a couple questions that we've received directly. We do have a few minutes here, so feel free to drop a few more in if you're so inclined. Of course, the first question that came in is on revenue. What kind of impact does a solution like this have on revenue, and how does that compare to traditional sales enablement solutions?
So if the last video I think we rolled really encapsulates the revenue efficacy of the ability to marry changes I'm making, and I look upon it as gauges, dials, and levers. A gauge tells me where I'm at. A dial and lever tells me what to push. Dials and levers are back in the content management system, back in the sales enablement system. I can change content effectively. I can change the path, the consumption path. I can change my coaching. The gauge tells me if I'm being effective or not. The gauge being revenue. The gauge being if I, and I we've seen customers that are testing sales enablement systems in proxy areas, so like Canada or Mexico, and saying, okay, let's do a POC or a proxy in that region, and let's start changing these dials and start moving these levers around, and they can actually see the revenue shifting. That to me is the ultimate test for a sales
Yeah,
enablement system.
absolutely. I'm going to interject here with a question that came in the chat because I think it's really important. From Murray, thanks for asking. Can the platform be branded for a client rather than picture branding to integrate fully into the company's selling or marketing brand story?
100%. That skinning is table stakes for any sales enablement vendor, and certainly Pitcher is no exception there. Pitcher has the ability to, and when Mondelez or Fidelity or any other customers deploying Pitcher across the board, they're seeing Pitcher. They're not seeing Pitcher; they're seeing their brands to their customers,
Yeah,
and so this is
absolutely.
something that is absolutely key.
Yeah. Next question is, how does this approach benefit teams outside of the sales organization? And you mentioned it a little bit in that last point there, but
Yeah.
share a little bit more on that.
So revenue and customer touches span not just the sales organization. They hit CS, they hit account management, they hit professional services, they hit marketing. And so every team needs to be on the same page from a content branding perspective, from a content effectivity perspective. In other words, if a piece of content is being deployed in the sales organization and the support organization or the CS organization or the marketing organization is not using that same piece of content, they're in a silo off by themselves, that's not good. Having that content consistency and brand experience, consistency across all different channels, that's what customers expect.
Yeah. One of the questions that came in is around return on investment. And the question starts with publishing, but then broadens just to customers in general. What's the best way to look at ROI for a sales enablement platform?
So, great question. Is that the ROI is primarily centered and what we've seen the most effective is if you can firewall off a particular organization that can act as a proxy, and you can say, okay, well, I'm going to deploy sales enablement in this region for a set period of time, like a month, but then I'm going to watch that particular region and the differences that can take. That is it's ROI from a revenue perspective, but it's also ROI from a selling efficiency perspective. Selling efficiency is all about what I said before is the freeing up key selling time. In other words, we've got these metrics that can show that before sales enablement, before Pitcher, I was only calling on 5 customers a day. Now I'm calling on 7 customers a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that puts more money into the rep's pocket, and that puts more revenue into the bottom line of the organization. That's
Yeah.
what ROI drives.
Yeah. Another question here. My company is a medical device company. We're located in the US, just outside of Boston. The question is essentially is why is sales enablement 2.0 important for medical device companies?
So touched on this a little bit in that medical device companies, when we were leaning into defining 2.0, it's a physical good. It's a physical, there's a device. In other words, like if you look at one of our key customers, Straumann does endodontic implants, dental implants. So that's a physical device. They're doing sampling, they're doing consent management, they're doing inventory control. So like if I can, it's one thing for me to take an order, show you a deck, show you a presentation, get your interest, take an order. But if I can't deliver that from an inventory and an available to promise perspective back in the back office systems, it does me no good, because suddenly that customer experience has now been deflated, because not
Yeah.
you just took my order, but you can't fulfill that order. What good is that?
Right. Yeah. And then one more question in the chat here, and this probably would require further conversation. But I think the heart of the question is: do you have experience for big companies with more than 20,000 users, and how do you manage that? How do you manage that whole ecosystem? Great
Yes,
question. Yeah.
scale is something that content systems and sales enablement systems are no stranger to, and Pitcher certainly leans in with some of our biggest customers at scales of like organizations like Mondelez, worldwide organization deploying thousands, tens of thousands of sellers around the globe, multiple language, multiple currencies, multiple instantiations of servers. And the criticality of uptime is something that we excel at. So this is something that, we are certainly no strangers to deployments at scale.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks. All right. That is all the questions that we have received today. Thank you for the participation. It's always wonderful to have that great feedback. We want to thank you all for joining us. Kevin, thanks. It's so fun to have these conversations with you. I learned so much about the industry in which we live, so it's awesome. Reach out to us directly. Here is our direct email. We'd love to hear from you. It's an exciting time to be in this industry and to be a seller out in the field. So definitely reach out to us. And thanks again, Kevin.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.